How's it going, everybody? My name is Seth. You already knew that. Welcome back to the Stupid Questions podcast. Today on the pod, we're going to be talking with Brandon Thelk. He is the founder and CEO of Evolved Athlete and Lightning Performance, two separate brands that help basically work with people, clients, on their mindset, emotional balance, and finding relationship dynamics in the way that they perform. It's a really awesome conversation. He works with athletes such as Lisa Pacaris, who's been a previous guest on the show, as well as Daniela Lewis. He works with Laura Gudrun, who is Sam Long's fiance, and obviously we all know who Sam Long is. So really awesome conversation today. I get to pick through Brandon's story. He's got quite an amazing story, from almost becoming a professional baseball player to working in the space that he does right now, with just helping people work through life and be better performers. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Brandon Thelk. So where are you at right now?
I'm in Nashville, downtown.
Okay, that's right. Yeah, you're not too far away. I was just hunting around on Instagram earlier today, doing some more research for the questions and whatnot, and it looks like you came to Chattanooga, and I should have reached out to you. I totally forgot.
Oh,
It's based on that, but that's awesome.
are you in Chattanooga?
I am right now, yeah. So I live probably from the race venue, like 25 minutes. If you're like going toward Knoxville, in a little town called Collegedale.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so
Yeah, it
not
was a
far.
fun trip. Got to
Yeah.
see some of the nature too, the Ruby Falls and Rock City.
Oh,
Those were really
oh
cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you from Nashville originally? Like, have you been there for a while?
So originally, I'm from outside the Chicago area, a little farm town
Okay.
called Sandwich, Illinois.
Okay, nice. That's so funny. Because I asked that question obviously quite a bit with different people, and I feel like it's got to be over 30% of people who I've had on here have been like, "Oh yeah, I'm from outside the Chicago area." Do you know Mark Dubrick?
I've heard the name. Let me think.
Yeah, he's a male pro, but he's from
Okay.
that outside that area, and
hmm
then obviously some of his friends and whatnot. But yeah, it's a small world, I guess.
hmm
Yeah,
Yeah, we're all kind of
but
migrating other places, get away from the cold
yeah,
weather. Yep.
Y- yeah, for real. How long have you been down here in the South?
uh, So I've been in the South quite a bit throughout my life, but so I've been in Nashville 4 years now. I moved
Okay.
down here during COVID when they
Oh,
started doing lockdowns and all that stuff. I've also
yeah.
I lived in Atlanta for about a year, Charlotte for about a year. I went to school out in Arizona,
Yeah.
so prefer the warm weather.
Yeah, 100%. When you went to school out in Arizona, what made you kind of go for that push other than weather?
Uh, well, yeah, that's an interesting story. So I was a baseball player. That's my background.
Okay.
And so I'd gone 2 years to a Division III school outside of Chicago. Out of high school, so I was a pitcher, a little bit of a late bloomer. So I was only throwing like 75 out of high school. And so my
Only.
mindset going into it was, after 2 years, I wanted to transfer to a big school. And so when the 2 years came up, I worked really hard and I got up to, kind of mid to high 80s. And I was kind of, I was in that place where it's like, okay, do I jump, or I'm actually kind of building myself up here. Um, and I was at like a family party, and my uncle, he was just kind of this like intimidating guy. I didn't really know him all that well, but he kind of like shook me. He was like, he's like, "What the hell are you still doing at that small school?" And he like called me out, and and I was like, "Oh shit, I guess I do have to take a jump," like because it kind of felt like this like divine intervention
Mm,
where I was kind of at this fork in the road, and he called me out, and it just really stuck with me. He's just like pick the best school and transfer and make it happen. And I was like, oh, okay. And so the next
yeah.
couple months, it stuck with me. I started to do some research. I always wanted to go out to Arizona, um, and so yeah, my dream school was ASU baseball wise, but then I saw that U of A in Tucson was a better fit for me, in terms of the town and things like that. And so, yeah, I took the leap. A couple months after he said that to me, I just transferred out there and tried to make things happen. Um,
Wow.
so I was prepared to give up baseball, because obviously that's a huge leap. And so actually, when I got out there, they had like started a club baseball team that year, which I wasn't really familiar with. So I got the opportunity to continue to grow and develop and work on my baseball skills there. And then I was playing year round for the first time in my life. So
Yeah, with the
things
weather.
really started to take off for me there.
Yeah, interesting. So I'm curious because I know nothing about baseball, but how does one going from pitching at, I guess, the D3 level, and then you said like you're starting to get faster. How do you get faster at pitching?
Well, you just kind of stumble through it, I guess. When I didn't have a lot of guidance, I was just like, oh, I'll just start like working out all the time and eating a bunch of food and stuff. And,
Yeah.
took a ton of supplements and things like that. And, yeah, I mean, I had a couple, people in like cousins in my family were personal trainers. So I reached out to them for guidance, be like, hey, like, can you give me like a training plan for a pitcher? Things like that. So it was just kind of each step of the way I was given more and more information to continue to build. And that's the thing. I think that's how everything starts is it starts very general and then it gets more specific the longer you kind of work the puzzle. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And I also, senior year of high school, I had an arm injury, playing football actually, that kind of
Mm.
set me back. So I was throwing like low 80s my junior year and then I had the arm injury and I was back down to 75. So I had to kind of rebuild
Mm.
from there.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
How do you measure, or I mean, obviously miles per hour, but are there other ways to measure like what your power output is, or
Uh, you
like other
know,
ways to measure your
they've gotten
gains?
so much more advanced with this stuff.
Yeah.
For me, it was more about feel. Like if it felt like
Yeah.
smooth and it felt explosive and things like that. But yeah, now they have all these different tools to measure that, the
Yeah.
power output.
Yeah. It's super interesting. So you mentioned a little bit ago when your uncle, he kind of gave you that sit down and was like, what are you doing at this small school? You said it felt a little bit like divine intervention. Do you believe in divinity?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think there's all these invisible forces that kind of push and pull on us and kind of steer us in different directions, and we don't know why. And that's kind of that thing is it's like if you're called to a bigger purpose, I think that's always going to be scary. But specifically that experience, like it drastically like shifted my life
Hmm.
forevermore. Like I could never be the same person after that. So,
Yeah.
I think like that's the important idea is like if you feel called to do something, like of course it's going to be scary, but that's a deeper part of you that's like speaking to you that is kind of calling you to this bigger purpose.
Yeah. Have you ever told your uncle about this? Like how drastically it changed your life?
Well, so unfortunately, the next year he passed away from I
Hmm.
think it was pancreatic cancer, or spleen.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, so it was like shortly after I did that. I got to speak to him once I went out there and I was doing that, but um, you know, in hindsight, it's just kind of like the magnitude of that splitting off and taking that leap. It
Hmm.
served me like greatly. I'll be forever grateful for that. But yeah, so I got to share that with him at the moment, but he did pass away pretty quickly after that.
Yeah. How many years ago was this now?
So yeah, that was probably about 2007, I would say.
Okay. So like 16, 17 years.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was a while ago.
Yeah. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 36.
36.
Hmm.
Okay. So when did you graduate college? Like in,
2010.
okay. And what did you take in college?
So I'm not a big like formal education person. So
Me
I
either.
studied nutritional sciences because I was just interested in health at the time. But it was like by the time I got around to my senior year, I was like very disheartened. Like I hardly wanted to go to class. Like it
Mm.
just didn't feel very inspiring. I didn't feel like the dietary recommendations they were giving us were accurate. So it just kind of felt like I was there for no reason because I've always been an eager learner, so it's just kind of like I do my own research, things like that, and I was
Yeah.
already kind of far outside of like that way of thinking, and so school, kind of was less and less important to me at that stage, and so I've always had this curiosity for growth and development and things like that. So yeah, I studied nutrition, but I can't say I've ever applied anything they ever taught me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I kind of I stand in a similar camp when it comes to education. I went to school for business, and if it wasn't for my wife, I probably would have dropped out several times, which
Yeah.
kind of leads me to my next question. Would you consider yourself an entrepreneur?
Uh, I guess a little bit. I'm trying to step more into I like taking risks. I like
Sure.
expressing myself in different ways through business. Am I like kind of the hustle and grind person? Absolutely not. So, yeah, I think it's my path is kind of one day at a time. I
Yeah.
find myself where every time I set up a big plan or vision, um, I tend to get rerouted. Like that was so when I was in my
Hmm.
mid 20s. Like yeah, I had this like huge business plan where I was going to do like 7 different businesses that like all fed into each other,
Wow.
and then it was just like as I started to do that, it was just kind of like, well, yeah, I felt like I was forcing it. I felt like I needed to grow in other areas before that, and so now that I look back, like 10 years later, a lot of these things are actually starting to develop kind of organically, but it's not like me like pushing and making them happen. Like it's just kind of things falling into place.
Yeah, natural and more experience with time kind
Mm-hmm.
of led you to those areas. Do you feel like for those businesses that were feeding into each other, are they within the same industry?
Yeah. So it's personal development's kind of always been my big thing. So it's just kind of a bunch of different niches, and then also like the design and marketing and things like that. Where I was kind of envisioning I could kind of take coaches under my wing and then develop them, and then also provide the marketing and things like that for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Cool, man. So, well, I mean, it's been 10 minutes now. I'm getting somewhat of a good picture where I feel like I could come up with a few descriptors of who you are. But before I kind of finish that formulation in my head, I would love to ask you the question in your eyes, who is Brandon?
Yeah. So to be honest with you, I have no idea. Every time I think I know, things kind of switch gears on me. So I see myself as a lifelong learner, a teacher, and a student. I'm here to serve and help others. And that's as far as I've gotten at this point. It
Yeah,
seems to be the recipe at the moment.
sure.
Mm-hmm.
What were you like as a kid?
So I've always been like very observant. I like to watch things and kind of come to my own conclusions, things like that. So I grew up. I have 3 older brothers, so I was the youngest. So I feel like that's really helped me kind of see their mistakes or them go on their
Hmm.
paths. We're all about 2 years apart, so it was a pretty cool recipe to kind of see. Um, I had some decent models to kind of pull from, and I guess that's the thing. I was obsessed with baseball. That was like the one thing I knew for sure is growing up outside Chicago, it was like value of you just can't wait for the winter to get over with and get out there and start playing baseball. That was like what I look forward to every year. I remember that.
Yeah.
But to be honest with you, so I've gone through like this kind of meditation process where I really kind of dismantle my past. So like memories don't like pop up easily for me anymore.
Yeah.
It's like I've kind of cleaned the past. It's like a little bit of a blank slate unless I get
Okay.
kind of clued into something. So yeah, I think just very observant, very curious. Always kind of wanting to know the deeper layers and levels to things. I guess would be the nutshell version.
Yeah. So you said you've worked to dismantle your past. Was that? I'm assuming that was on purpose.
Yeah, so it was just kind of yeah. So when I was 15 years old, I got introduced to like spiritual work, energy work, a lot of spirituality, philosophy, things like that. I've always had a big hunger for that, and so I got to this point where I was always like recognizing like patterns in my life. And that's a big part of my work now is I walk people through these processes of yeah, it's like we just kind of repeat similar patterns over and over again until we learn the lessons, right? And so yeah, it was like my late 20s. So it was kind of the first iteration of my business, Evolved Athlete. I was working with exclusively baseball players. And I was just kind of hitting this point where I was just like, yeah, I don't really I lost my interest in baseball, to be honest with you. Like I was just kind of over it, and it had been my whole life, and there was just kind of like this rebirth that needed to happen. And so I went through basically this kind of meditation process where I kind of tore down the business. I went into basically kind of my cave, I call it, where I just kind of sat in silence for about 6 hours a day, which sounds crazy. But
Yeah.
I just reworked
Wow.
my mind on every level. And, I still have a very dedicated meditation practice where if something's bothering me, I'll take a deeper look at it and try and explore what's going on there. But it was a couple of years where I just really like consciously like wipe the slate clean. And so with meditation, all I was trying to do is I would study these things that were bothering me, these patterns that kept showing up, and I would try to rework them in my mind so that they no longer had like a negative story attached to them. Okay,
Hmm.
so I was basically like dismantling the story within myself over and over again to basically clean that slate, so that I would be open to these new experiences, right? I would basically things like started to feel much more natural to me rather than, like I said, being pushed by your past of like avoidance of pain, which is a big thing. It was just like dismantling all the painful stories so that I didn't have to carry that stuff with me anymore.
Yeah. It's interesting. Have you ever heard of EMDR therapy?
Yeah, I often get told my work's similar to that. I've never gone through it, so I don't know.
So yeah, it's interesting. I have. I mean, it's different. It's using bilateral stimulation, but for the end goal of basically going through old memories, typically painful ones, to kind of deconstruct the negative belief that you have about yourself, and then
Mhm.
coming through it and processing through it to where you have like a positive, essentially at the end. But it was interesting when the way you were talking about that practice, because I've done it a few times for a couple of different like really tough things, like getting held at gunpoint or just like abuse as a child, and it worked quite well. But it's interesting to hear like your experience of it, because it sounds like it wasn't directly influenced by, you haven't or obviously done it
Yeah,
before. So
yeah. So I had plenty. I was on this big spiritual journey in my 20s. I was just kind of, it's like if anything like interested me, I would go do it, right? And so I ended up having like mentors and teachers and things like that. And so,
sure.
and yeah, I was very empathic. So I was in a lot of pain, and I was kind of in my angsty pain, right, where I'm just trying to work through that. And and yeah, so no matter who I worked with, I started to see commonalities of like, oh, this is how you shift out of these things, like your trauma and your
Hmm.
pain and things like that. And yeah, I've always been like ultra sensitive. So it was just like if something was bothering me, it would like consume me. And so I had to develop these things out of necessity, really, to just kind of be able to function properly. And so it's like through those processes, I just distilled it down to what I thought the most important things were. And so now I kind of have this replicatable process that I teach people of just like, yeah, like if you can pull up any stress and we can work through it this way, like it works just about every time. And it might not be immediate, but once we get through the layers and levels, like it will shift. So I just did that with myself over and over again, like thousands of times, to basically
Yeah.
heal my past.
Yeah. Do you mind sharing some of those things that you healed from?
It was now that I look back at them, I'm just like, yeah, these are just kind of things that everybody goes through. But
Oh, don't minimize it. Don't minimize
no,
it.
but yeah, it's more of just I grew up with a single mother. Like I said, it's four boys. My dad was there. Blue collar construction worker. We'd go with him on weekends. And he just had a lot of anger issues, so it was pretty volatile situations there.
Hmm.
I just remember like weekends, like going with my dad, and it was always just like tense. And there's a lot of anger, volatility, and so just kind of had to walk on eggshells. And then, we'd go back with my mom during the week, and then it just kind of felt like more peaceful and relaxed. But it
Yeah.
was just like she had her own things, right? Where raising four boys by herself, just kind of being late a lot, and like so. th- those kind of equate to a little bit of like abandonment wounds, I guess, of just kind of feeling
Sure.
like alone a lot. Those were some of the things of just the intensity of that, and then kind of feeling like not as seen as I would like to be, right? And so that creates this recipe of just like developing these chips on your shoulders and, just kind of having that pain within you. And so I just really got fascinated with healing work on like, oh, I don't really have to carry these things as much anymore. And so, yeah, with my clients, I hear just about every story under the sun. And so because I've done this work myself, I'm able to help guide them through it. Even if I haven't had that exact experience, I can kind of see something similar in my past.
Yeah, it sounds a little like almost even sports psychology / counseling work.
Yeah, it's a mixture of a lot of things. I just kind of made it up.
Yeah.
Throughout my path, I'm just like, oh, this is what I would have wanted if I was in these situations.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you've obviously tried a lot of different things. I'd be curious to know, I guess, to ask you what, I guess, set of values and beliefs did you or have you come to like hold dear as you've gone through all of these different experiences, beliefs about, I mean, divinity, we talked about greater forces, that kind of stuff, beliefs about yourself and the values you hold and the relationships you build.
So everything I've distilled it down to is just really pay attention to what you feel, and then that guides you to deeper and deeper levels within yourself. So my value system is like if something feels off to me, I take a deeper look at that and I see what's going on. And I'm always trying to bring it back to a neutral, like peaceful, harmonious place. And so, yeah, it's just like I think, I just operate under the general guise of do no harm, right? Those kinds of ideas of like, if I have pursuits or ambitions, like I don't have to do negative things to other people to get those. That's very important to me. And, I think that idea of like kind of karma is important. It's like I don't subscribe to a specific religion or anything like that. But I definitely believe in God. And I think our feeling senses are our biggest clue to that truth, which ultimately I think is unconditional love, of, not needing, our wounds and our pain. We usually project that stuff outward. So if we heal that stuff, we can operate in a pretty clean way where we're not, we're only really having a positive impact on ourselves and the people around us.
Yeah. Unconditional love. That seems like a good tenet to live by.
Mm-hmm.
Is that easy to do?
Oh, absolutely not. It's like and that's the thing is it's this idea of the ego. So when you ask the question, like, who am I? Our ego is like our identity or who we think we are. And we're always trying to protect that. Okay. And so a bit of that process I went through is just, it's really dismantling the ego or who I think I am, because like, that's what's like causes us to do bad things, really. And so it's like getting to this clean place of, if I feel myself trying to influence something or manipulate something, I've developed this process to just kind of put myself back in check. So I'll just go into meditation, I'll study that, and I'll look at whatever wound or whatever is attached to that so that I can let that go. And that in that place of surrender, usually the problem kind of resolves itself. So I don't really need to manipulate things anymore. It was just a problem within me. So I believe like the internal is reflected in the external. So we're here to work out these different experiences, and we do that through generally relationship is our biggest mirror for us. So those problems we face with other people like are pointing to issues within ourselves. And so it's just taking a look at that stuff and being like, well, yeah, if I'm in anger, if I'm in shame, if I'm in guilt, there's usually a story attached to that from our past. And that's, we just kind of want to examine those things, rework them. And that's really kind of where we start to return to that state of unconditional love of like, I don't need to do this because like I've healed this part of me.
Yeah. Are you married?
No, I have a girlfriend right now.
Okay.
But yeah, so it was like, for a long time, I didn't date too much, because it was just like this intensive process I went through. But yeah, so I'm starting to get into those things now.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've been on quite a long journey, multiple years even, to where you've come to this place of, I would call it peace, or I would say peace.
Yeah, I mean, let's say if I'm not at peace, I know how to get to peace very rapidly now. And that definitely wasn't always the case. And yeah, so that was my mindset. So my prime motivators, I've always wanted to be the best at something. I
Hmm.
thought that was baseball, but that kind of transformed into this. And then, it was like through these different things, I started to see like this type of work has a positive impact on literally every aspect of our lives.
Yeah.
And so I saw this as kind of my mode that I went all in on. And so I wanted to get to, a pretty healthy place, before I started adding other things to my life. So I've lived a very simple life up until this point. And now I'm kind of more in that adding in extra pieces and growing and doing those things
Yeah.
because it's all this stuff's pretty stable now for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Congratulations. I mean, that's a great place to be. I think a lot of people want to be there. So the fact that I mean, I wouldn't say you fully arrived. I mean, we're all going through a journey, but it seems like you're at a much better place. So that's really neat.
Yeah, honestly, it was such a long road. I didn't know when to say that, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Have you heard of like the Dark Night of the Soul? Like, have you heard of those things before? Those
The
concepts?
Dark Night of the Soul, I have not heard of that specific
Yeah,
concept, but I probably can follow where
yeah.
you're
So it's
going.
like you like go through like a depression, and then
Hmm.
you start like questioning everything in your life, where you're just
Yeah.
like, oh, like I can't move forward in the same way. And it literally feels like you're like going through like a death.
Yeah.
Because you have to like shed all this stuff from your past. And then after that, you're kind of reborn into something new. And yeah, so I went through like many and many of those
Yeah.
to get to this place, and that's why I don't really operate on identity or attachment anymore. And that
Hmm.
might be a Buddhist principle, but it's yeah, like as soon as we attach to something and make it our identity, that's kind of where suffering starts. Is
Yeah.
we start to build our world around that, and if things don't work out the way we want them to, there's a ton of
Hmm.
pain attached to that. So,
Yeah.
so it's a little bit of that process.
Yeah, it's super interesting on the topic of religion or even political, because as soon as people attach, at least I come up from a pretty religious background, and a lot of people would use this excuse for why they quote unquote left the church or left the faith or left this whatever mindset. And it's usually, oh, well, so and so, I really looked up to them, but then they did this. And then
Hmm.
it's like their belief system was attached to this one individual
Hmm.
or one concept. And as soon as that's betrayed, then they fall away from it. And then you have the same thing in politics.
Yeah.
Everyone subscribes to an ideal and someone embodies that ideal. And as soon as that ideal falls off the expectation list, it's like everybody loses their mind.
Yeah,
So,
well, that's the thing.
yeah.
Their concepts or ideas. They are very difficult to embody properly. It takes a lot of work to do it well, right? No matter what it is. And yeah, I think people just have bad models, and then they close that door, right? They close those
Yeah.
things off, and uh, not everything's kind of a mixed bag. There's good and bad in everything, and so growth comes from sorting through and finding those nuances.
Yeah. So I have a question for you on the topic of baseball, because that was something that you definitely attached to. When did that die, and like as a part of you, and did that hurt?
Yeah, that was extremely painful. Yeah, so that's the thing is when you go all in on things and it doesn't work out, it kind of hits you like a ton of bricks, right? And yeah, so I was 26. Yeah, after Arizona, I didn't get drafted or anything, so I kept pursuing it. Yeah, because I was always I was always progressing, so I was like, oh, I'll just stick with it
Yeah.
until we'll see what happens. And so, I go to tryouts and, I was training, 6 to 8 hours a day, doing all the crazy stuff. And so, yeah, got to that point, kind of make or break point, like as a pitcher, especially mid 20s is very old, especially to break in. And so I
Hmm.
had come up with this plan. So my cousin, he trained like professional athletes in Charlotte. So I went to go train with him. He introduced me to a pitching coach. I had never had like proper guidance on mechanics. I would just watch like tons of videos and try and make something up for me.
Hmm.
And so, at 25, I went out there. I worked with this guy every single day. And I was lifting, about 4 hours a day and just like eating
Good
nonstop.
grief.
So I gained 25 pounds of muscle in that time,
Wow.
like 4 months. And then, so I was working with this pitching coach and he rebuilt my mechanics from the ground up. So I went from low 90s to, creeping up to mid 90s. And so this was kind of my master plan to go get signed, right? And so I did all that work. And so I got an opportunity. I went down to Houston to do some workouts with the Astros. And, it was like an open tryout situation. And so I get down there, it's the middle of the summer in Houston, and it's super hot. And, and, I was also like really broke at the time. Like I didn't have any resources to do anything. So I get down to Houston
Sure.
and I started like dropping weight like crazy. Um,
Couldn't eat.
yeah, so I was like, I wasn't hungry and like, I didn't have a lot of money for food either. I was just trying to make this happen. And so, yeah, like I dropped like 10 pounds in a week. I
Oh
do,
my word.
yeah, I do the tryout, and it was like my nervous system, because there was so much like failure built up over baseball over all
Mm.
those years. Like it was like really, really painful. Every time something didn't work out, like it kept like amplifying. And so basically going to these tryouts, I would kind of go into a depression. I would like feel all these like horrible feelings, thoughts. And so when I would go to perform, like I just wouldn't have anything. And so I went to this first tryout with the Astros, and yeah, I was like, my velocity dropped to like 88. I was like high 80s again, and yeah, I was like, I had no control, like everything was crazy. And so I was just like, yeah, I went and talked to one of the scouts there. I was just like, hey, I was like, I know this looked really bad. I was like, will you give me another shot? Um, and so like I'm down in Houston, and yeah, I didn't know anybody. I was just staying with some random guy like I met, when I was in Arizona, and so I get like a personal like tryout set up. I convinced this guy. I sent him references, being like, "Hey, this is all the work I've just done, and all these people can vouch for me, and I'll put it together." So
Yeah.
I put and I got it set up for this men's league game in Houston, and so I went out there, and um, so I show up, and yeah, it's just kind of it's really sketchy and really like the players they like come up wearing like construction boots and stuff and jeans, and it just like wasn't like an athletic environment. Um,
Yeah.
and so and it's like the clouds are just like dark. It looks like there's going to be a tornado and stuff. It's just like all hell's like breaking loose on me, and like my energy is just like sinking. And so the guy like shows up, and yeah, I was just like really, really heavy. And so at that point, like I go start pitching, and it felt like I was in quicksand. Like everything was just so heavy. So that day I threw like 82 miles an hour. Uh,
Oh man.
and yeah, so after that, I was just like, it was kind of like an all is lost moment where I'm just like, I don't really know what to do anymore. Um,
Hmm.
I had, put all this time, effort, and energy into this. And so I'm just like, yeah, I'm just like going back home, and I'm going to regroup. So yeah, I just like moved back home, and yeah, it was kind of like a month where I really couldn't get out of bed, to be honest with you. It was just
Wow, you're
like,
just super
well,
depressed.
yeah, everything was just like locked down in my body too. Cause it was like, I was really fighting myself. Um, Whereas like this is what I wanted, but I got like so desperate to try and make it happen that, yeah, it was kind of just, it took all the joy out of it. So it was no longer fun for me.
Hmm.
And so I put baseball down, and I unpacked it all. And, a lot of it tied back to things with my dad. He would like tell me I wasn't going to make it and things like that.
Hmm.
A lot of these things were very painful for me. And so I just kind of went deep in on the healing work from that point. I was like, okay, like I need to move on to some next chapter. Like, I don't know what that is. So I have the time and space to regroup and kind of sort through those things. But that's what I do really with my clients now is this nervous system regulation. So basically I had so much pain it's associated with these situations that my nervous system would literally shut down. It went into like protection mode. And so I couldn't like perform. And so that's what I really dissected and went in all in on learning. I was like, why did this happen? And so it's all these ideas. And so all this, our body's programmed by our mind. So if we have all these negative thoughts and experiences that are attached to something, such as like baseball, that could really put us in that shutdown mode if we're not careful. And so with my clients, I do like guide through all the family stuff. Like how did you grow up? Like what did these things look like? And try and bring things to a healthy place so it doesn't get to that desperate, like heavy place.
Yeah.
So after that, I just kind of, after I regrouped and stuff, it was like some August or September at that time. And so I was just like, okay, when I pick up a baseball again, there's going to be no pressure. I'm just going to do it for fun. And so I had to like rebuild my relationship with baseball. And so, yeah, I would just do men's leagues. I'd do tournaments and stuff, but I would just connect back to the childhood version of it where it was just really pure and really fun. And it's not like me trying to make a career out of it.
Did that bring you the level of happiness that you were looking for in it and the sport again?
So it's like it just started to mean less and less to me, and it's kind of even today. It's like I can go pick up a baseball, and I can probably throw high 80s, like not trying. I built my body for that, but it's like I don't. It's fun to connect with here and there, but I guess I just don't care much about it anymore. It
Yeah.
feels like another life at this point.
Yeah. Sure.
Hmm.
Yeah, you've done a lot now. So, I want to ask one more question about your past, and then we'll move kind of to the post this situation, and then like more modern days, the stuff you're doing on now, because there's a lot to talk about there. Um, Male role models. So you said your dad said to you like that you wouldn't make it, and obviously, like, yeah, seeing that in the context of baseball not come to what you thought would happen or what you wanted to bring to fruition, obviously super difficult. But moving through these situations and kind of finding a new voice within you, did you have any new male role models that you kind of looked to for mentorship to kind of, I don't know, reframe those voices in your head of like where your value and worth is?
Yeah, so it was kind of an ongoing process. So even at that stage, like I was always seeking that out. 'Cause being raised
Mm-hmm.
by a single mother, like I did actually. There was a period in high school where I moved in with my dad for a while to try and build that relationship. And yeah, when I went to college and moving forward, I was always looking for male role models that embodied principles and ideas that I wanted to live. And so yeah, I had a couple of baseball coaches. One specifically, he actually like helped me through college. He was just kind of just like a salt of the earth, like wonderful person. And he's actually kind of a legend in this town. It's called Oswego, Illinois. Like all the stadiums are named after him and everything. Like
Oh,
he was
really?
kind of just like he had built him and his wife had built a business, like a dress shop, and it became like world famous. Like people would come from all over. And so he ended up making a lot of money, but he was like a sports coach. And so he just would like donate all these things to the school. Like he would like help kids through college. And so I'd say he's like one of my biggest role models is like he really embodied like, generosity and yeah, just that unconditional love. Like I said, I mean, he would get upset with people like if he felt like they weren't like living up to their potential.
Mm.
But a lot of great conversations with him. He's passed away at this point. But yeah, it was just he was probably one of the most amazing people I've ever met. Growing up, I was always like Michael Jordan. Growing up in the Chicago area, Michael Jordan. I was always like looking at him, and yeah, it's even today. Like I'll watch some of his videos and stuff like that. I love his perspective on a lot of things. Um, yeah, it was just I would just look for certain traits in people, and so even if they had a lot of other flaws, like I'd be like, oh. You kind of like pick and choose, like, oh, these are some
Mm-hmm.
ideas that I really like. I need to learn more about that.
Mm.
And so I was always like eager to do those things.
Yeah. So growing up in a single mother's household, and you said four brothers. It's four of you total.
Yeah, four of us total. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sure that was wild. But just thinking about that childhood, and then you said you're now to a place where you're introducing the thought of relationships or maybe a long-term partner
Hmm.
in the future. I'm assuming that you do want to have kids. Um, maybe not.
I'm very in the moment. It's definitely something I consider more and more every day. Um,
Sure.
but it's like I also like kind of view. So a big part of what I do with my clients is I call it like reparenting. Is we're shifting a lot of these like things that they were taught as children, right? And so it's like I kind of feel like a lot of that gets fulfilled through my work.
Mm.
And so I'm curious it hasn't like struck me being like, yeah, like I'm absolutely going to do this, but I'm definitely open to that possibility.
Yeah. So let's pretend that you have Brandon Jr. or maybe it's a girl. Um, what are the things? Let's go actually specifically with a boy because I think that's, you probably want to be the father that you didn't have. What kind of things would you say and the beliefs you would try to instill in that child to give him what you didn't have?
Well, so first off, I will like to say, me and my dad have actually a great relationship now. We've rebuilt that from the ground up, and yeah, I can kind of tell him anything. So it's like
Oh, that's awesome.
through my healing process, like it's like kind of all's forgiven at this point. And if anything comes
Yeah.
up within me, I work on it, so I'm not kind of holding that against him. But that's just how I go about my business. Is I don't believe in like cutting people out of your life. I believe like working through the problems that are in those
Mhm.
relationships. I think those are all tools for growth. And so yeah, what would I instill? Yeah, so once again, it's just really, really pay attention to what you feel. Like don't self-sacrifice. Don't betray yourself. Things like that. And like I said, I feel like our feeling sense is what's in tune with God, and we always kind of know that right or wrong. But oftentimes it's like I think adults who are authority figures like override those instincts within us, and that's kind of where we lose trust in ourselves. And I think if you look
Mhm.
at a kid, they come here with it all. Like, they have those heightened senses, like they can feel what's right and wrong, they can feel what's off. And I think when we kind of like program our preferences into them, they lose a little bit of sight and connection to themselves. So
Yeah.
that's mostly how I would go about that. Is yeah, and if there were problems that surfaced or came up, I would help them work through it emotionally. And that's that nervous system regulation is like kids especially need their parents to help co-regulate them to get them back into balance. And so it's allowing them to feel and allowing them to work through things that I think is super important.
Yeah. Um, One other question, just because things keep coming up on my mind, I'm super curious. The 6 hour meditation that you used to do, I guess multiple sessions of those, can you give me kind of a blueprint, practically speaking, of like what went on? Because I've done meditation. Usually, I'm picking like a specific thing that I'm meditating on, a belief or a thought, or I mean, I guess it could be called meditation if I'm working through something like difficult, where I'm trying to like come to terms with something. But for you, what were you going through mentally? Are you just like emptying yourself and then thinking about a specific thing? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I guess my philosophy in general is that I believe that our emotions are stored in our body and our traumas are stored in our body. And so through the feeling sense, we can get in tune with that. So basically, I get into my body and I feel it. And if there's any sort of tension or contraction within my body, I focus my attention on it and I start taking deep breaths into it. And in that process, so I'm basically communicating with my nervous system that I'm safe and it's okay to look at this. And so you start to see what's behind that feeling. The story attached to it, the memories of, so a memory I see is like it's like an image and emotion. Okay. So the emotion's been left in a negative place. And so all we're trying to do is neutralize it. And once we neutralize it, we see the positive benefit of that situation. So everything has the positive and negative aspects. And so you're trying to complete or resolve the situation. And so you bring it full circle. So this negative thing needed to happen to me to get to this point so that I understood this. And now that I know this, I'm better off for that. And so now I can put that to the side and that's what healing is I'm no longer carrying the negative energy associated with those situations. So I use the body as the guide. So if I feel tension somewhere, I'm focusing on it consciously and I'm breathing into it and I'm approaching it with curiosity. And in that process, you may unlock like some pretty volatile emotions, like, some anger, rage, things like that, shame. And so all I'm trying to do is get it to this neutral place of not seeing it in that way anymore. So everything's just a perception shift. So I'm just trying to see that situation in a way that no longer hurts me.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, in that process, we can let go of negative beliefs. We can let go of grudges we're holding against other people. That's kind of mechanics of forgiveness is like, I've healed it within me. So I no longer am holding on to that negative tension and negative story. So it's just shifting how you see the situation. And so I'm just operating like, no matter what it is, like if I'm going to be my best, like I can't carry this stuff from the past. So I'm trying to let people off the hook. No matter what you've done to me, like I'm trying to make peace with it. Um, because if I carry that forward, that's going to be affecting me in a negative way. And so it's just using the body as a guide, and then being in this kind of, when the emotions get activated, you want to get back to that calm, centered place so that you can start to shift how you're seeing the situation. And, I think the defaults you're trying to get your mind to is, I call them like truths. So it's just kind of like, am I really not unworthy or not loved or any of those things? Or was that, given that scenario, those are conclusions I made about myself, right? And so I'm trying to restore back to some default settings of just like, yeah, I'm loved and I'm worthy and I'm good enough and like all those things. And this situation made me think otherwise. And what I try to do is it's really like intergenerational. So I try to see my parents and like maybe their perspective and like what they went through. I try to get back in my lineage to see, okay, how were they raised? Like, what beliefs do they carry about themselves? Like,
Yeah.
and if all that's going on, like, of course, they're going to be passing that on to me. And so it's my job to heal it, because if I don't, then I'm going to be passing it on to the next generation.
Yeah. Lots of really good tools here that it seems like you have curated over time. And then obviously you carry those through to your current, I guess, work with Evolved Athlete. I guess tell me a little bit about that company as a whole, how it started, and then does it focus primarily on triathlon? And if so, when did that become the focus, and like how did you get involved? So there's about 12 questions for you.
Yeah, so I have two brands that I'm operating right now. So one is Evolved Athlete, the other is Lightning Performance. So Evolved Athletes, obviously athletes. Lightning Performance, I work with business professionals. So that's going to be executives, corporate training, things like that. Yeah, and so Evolved Athlete, it started. So I was done with baseball. And, I've worked with that pitching coach in Charlotte that had really helped me exponentially. And, so I was just kind of the next year, I was in this regroup period of like trying to find my way. And, the beauty of like kind of all this is like I always had, so my dad owns a painting company. So I would always be able to just do that for money, like anytime I needed something. Right. And so it kind of gave me a lot of freedom to pursue these other routes and just kind of have that need met when I needed it. And so it was just like that next year, I would work with him, and that also helped me heal my relationship with him. Is I would go put myself in that, and so yeah, I'd go do seminars, things like that, try and network. So I was at a conference, and this was actually one of my mentors. So her son was a baseball player in high school, and he was trying, to get better. So I was in the class, and at break, I pulled her aside, and I was like, hey, like, I was a baseball player, this is what I'm thinking. Because I had the idea for the business, and so I just presented it to her, and she's like, yeah, like, that sounds great. Like, do whatever you want. Just get him to where he wants to go. So she gave me like free reign to create the program. And so that first iteration, I did bring on, because her son was a pitcher. So I brought on that pitching coach from Charlotte. And so for the next 2 years, we worked with high school baseball players. And so it was like a high-end coaching program. I just kind of made it up. Where I would do one phone session a week, and he would do a video session on mechanics. And then we would quarterly, we would do what are called immersions, where these families would fly us out to wherever they're at, and both of us, and we'd work with their son for 8-hour days, where we just kind of pick apart every aspect of their lives. And so, after about 2 years of that, I was like, yeah, like, I needed to work with, because a lot of these high schoolers, some of them would really want it, but other ones would say they wanted it, but they weren't really that dedicated, right? And so we're charging a lot of money for this, and so I was like conflicted about it. I was like, yeah, I want to work with people that want this, right? And a lot of times it was the parents wanting it for the kid, not the kid wanting it. So, so that's why after that 2 years, that's when I scrapped that. And so I got into triathlon after that. So I went to college with Laura Gruden. So she's Sam Long's fiance. And she was just getting into triathlon. And so I just reached out to her and I was like, hey, like, I'm trying to get out of baseball. Like, what do you think about me coaching you? And so, yeah, in the beginning, I was just like, yeah, like, I don't really know what I'm doing here. Like, let's just try it out. And, and she really loved the work. So, that kind of gave me this new door. And then she started like introducing me to, the triathlon world. And so that's kind of how that all shifted. So in that process, I was working with her and like basically her friends when I shut down baseball and I got rid of that business partner. We went our separate ways because he was always just going to stay in baseball, and I didn't really want that anymore. And I wanted to expand into new things. And so yeah, just kind of that was the game plan, and that allowed for me to go into do my meditation practice of just really rewiring myself from the ground up. And yeah, it's like every couple months she'd just be like, hey, I got a new person for you. And she'd like send me, I told them all about your work. And then that's like I started getting into like business people that way. So they all kind of went hand in hand, because she was working with like business owners, personal training wise. So if they're having like mental problems or emotional stuff, she'd send them to me. And then, that's how I got into business stuff too. So it just kind of went hand in hand, I guess.
Yeah, so in terms of like the sports side with triathlon and the coaching, it's more of like mental, emotional, relational focus. There's not like you're not assigning physical workouts, bike
No.
workouts, stuff like that.
No,
Yeah.
so I know nothing about it, and I don't care to.
Yeah.
So yeah, so with this work, it applies to everything in terms that's stress related. So if I'm like not feeling good about something, if I have low confidence, if I'm doubting myself, any of that stuff, like that's causing mental emotional stress. So we go in and rework that. So we try and figure out where that came from, which is always going to be your past. Um, and we try and free up the mind to open the door to new things. So that may include like the mental emotional work. Maybe hey, maybe you need a different coach that's going to support you in this way, right? Like, and so that's if people like get stuck or they hit a plateau or whatever. There's always different buttons you push. But the first part is actually like you shifting your mind about it because,
Mm.
we are creatures of habit. And so we're just going to keep doing things over and over again until they don't work anymore. And so the evolve part is like, evolving is really making new decisions on a regular basis. It's always questioning yourself. It's always looking deeper. It's always trying to find new and better ways of whatever you're trying to accomplish.
So mindset mastery, emotional balance, and relational dynamics are the like three stated areas of expertise that you talk about.
Yeah. So, and I would say relationship has to do with everything, and that's the most important because it's not only relationship with other people. It's like how do you relate to your sport, right? That you have a relationship built there, right? So I would say that the foundation of everything is this idea of relationship. It's like how do I experience myself through whatever medium this is?
Yeah. So if someone reaches out and says, Brandon, I want to work with you, what does that onboarding typically look like? Is it like a 1 hour session where you're talking to them and just getting a download of who they are, and then you kind of find the areas where they want to work on? Or
Yeah, so it's I just have them fill out a questionnaire. I'm asking questions about what their goals are, what they're trying to achieve, what do they feel like's holding them back, those types of things. The first session, it's an hour and a half. My normal sessions are an hour. But yeah, so that first part's me getting to know them on a deeper level. And that includes like asking about childhood dynamics and how their relationship with their parents and things like that. So I'm always trying to improve all areas of your life. And then, yeah, from there, it's like I teach the mechanics of this work. So it's just like focus on your body. We're going to be breathing into tension. We're going to be unlocking things from the past, and we're going to be shifting perception. So I'll give the mechanics of the mind and the nervous system and how all those things work. And then we just go to work on the top priority issues. So whatever is bothering you the most, wherever you feel like you're stuck, wherever the pain's coming from, all these things. And usually the bigger emotion attached to something, the more painful it is, the more of a story is behind it. And so, and when we're dealing with like complex issues that may be kind of trauma based, it's not just like one thing we're dealing with. It's like in that experience, our mind associated like 15 different things with that. So we got to unlock all those different areas to basically heal that trauma. And so you're just looking at like every little aspect of things, trying to get the pieces to align with what you're doing. Because a lot of times, we say we want to do something, but then our actions are quite the opposite, right? And so basically, that's what I consider integrity is like when you're in alignment. When you say and what you do are the same thing. And the only reason we're not doing that is because of pain from our past. We have all these avoidance patterns and coping mechanisms that have kind of developed throughout that process. And we may be outgrowing those, but we may be still operating from them. So it's really, I call it like getting up to speed with who you are, meaning like I shouldn't be operating today about things when I was like 5 years old, right? It's like, but a lot of our emotions and our thought processes are formed in that age. And so it's kind of this unpacking that has to happen to, get in alignment with what you're doing.
Is this something that can be taught, you think, through a book that you would write that people could then practice on their own, or would you encourage the one-on-one?
Yeah, so I am approaching that time to like systemize things. Danielle Lewis, actually, the last time I talked to her, she's like, when are you going to write a book?
I was actually about that. Yeah.
So it's definitely when I was 25, I started writing the book. I was actually designed it as like a corporate wellness manual. That's like a different story, but then I was just like, oh, I need to put that down for a while. I need to go learn all these things at a deeper level. And so now it's like I feel like I have my bearings on so many things that all that stuff, dealing a book and a course and public speaking and things like that, group work. That's all like in process right now.
Will that fulfill you to the same level as the one-on-one work you've been doing now, you think?
That's so I see like all problems as the same, but I guess it's like getting people to the point where they also feel that way, because that's where group work is productive, is when people can be really vulnerable and like, because group work's like helpful when, so I'm working with one person and they're sharing things, but somebody else has a similar problem, right? So they're like learning from each other and it's not personal, so that they get to see it in a different way, right? And so it's like, I have no hangups about group work, but my clients tend to want the one-on-one stuff, which it's like, it's fine. I love that work too. Like it's all good to me as long as I'm helping people. I think I'm fulfilled.
Yeah. Yeah, it depends on the personality, I would say, but I would definitely vouch for the group work, working on certain issues in a group setting, because then it's like for the certain kind of individual, it's getting up and proclaiming whatever it is, getting off your chest in a group setting. There's a level of accountability, but at the same time, there's another person that doesn't talk, isn't as freely to talk in an open group, but having them observe someone else go through that sometimes gives them the confidence to, or unlock a piece of whatever is going on inside for them to move forward. So I love group work, but I'm more of an extroverted personality, and I think that's just who I am.
Well, and I think behind it's usually some form of shame, right? Like when we feel shame, we do shut things down. We do suppress them. We don't openly share them. And so you have to build that trust with a person for them to open that up. And that's to say, so I view it all as the human experience. Like we all kind of go through a lot of these similar dynamics. But yeah, it depends on how personal and how intense that experience is, whether people open up or not. So yeah, I see them both as necessary in their own ways. I think a lot of stuff that I handle one-on-one can be done in group. And so, I prefer, because they're just similar themes over and over again, but the intensity of those might be specific to one of those people. Yeah.
I just came up with a great business idea that I'm sure you're going to be down with. Okay, so here's the thing. You get a really sweet house out in the middle of, I don't know, let's just say Hawaii, and you can invite, let's say 25 people that are going to come to this, and it's a training camp. At the same time, you've got working with Brandon, I don't know, we'll say it's for a week, and you 2 times a day you're doing like these hour-and-a-half sessions. Would you ever do something like that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's often something I've thought about is, partnering with different athletes maybe that have the following, and, I think it could work really well. Yeah.
I'm sad I'm not one of those athletes, because I want to make that happen right now. It sounds like such a fun thing to do.
Well, yeah, we'll see what happens. That's saying is I'm pretty wide open. I don't have any reservations about things anymore. It's like I do feel like everybody could use this work on some level. It's just their readiness for it. And when I get somebody that's super ready, it's just such amazing to see how quickly they can shift.
Yeah. I'm going to write you about this afterwards. My mind's going crazy. I'm like, oh, I have so many ideas. But it's really cool to hear what you've gone through on a personal level, and obviously the lives you've touched. I've interviewed a number of the people you've worked with, Lisa Picaris and Danielle Lewis, and I think that's it, actually. But yeah, it's been neat to hear their stories, and then now get to hear from someone who obviously influenced their lives, but then watching you go through it's pretty cool.
And yeah, it's like, I love triathletes. I would have never thought like this would be my path, but it's like, 3 disciplines, extremely driven, willing to kind of look at anything. It's a different mindset that you don't get a lot of other ways. So I think when I take a step back, I'm just like, yeah, this is kind of perfect, actually, that it's like been my niche now for a little bit. So I'm curious to see where it continues to lead. Like I said, I've dropped the attachments and expectations. I'm just like, oh, like, yeah, this road keeps opening up, so I'm going to keep following it, right?
Yeah, 100%. So a couple more questions for you. First one, because I forgot to ask it in the beginning. How do I pronounce your last name?
Oh, it's Thelk.
Thelk.
Thelk, yes.
What is the etymology? What is the origin of Thelk?
I think it's like German. I don't know. It's it's always challenging though for people.
Yeah. I wanted to say Thielk. I wasn't sure about.
Yeah,
It's a cool last name.
Yeah, back in the day, there's like a lot of cell marketers and stuff. It used to be pretty entertaining to hear.
Yeah. Which one are they gonna hit today?
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, final question. It's one and for advice, I guess for me, but anyone who's listening, for the relationship that they have that's probably not it isn't in a good spot, and there's avoidance, there's just like a lot of negativity there. Some people deal with that. I know I have in the past have dealt with those kind of relationships by basically treating that person like they're dead, or kind of a situation where you're just not even interacting. What steps practically can someone take to start to change that mindset to where they can repair that relationship with, maybe it's a parent or loved one, a sibling, any of those things?
Well, yeah. I mean, first, you got to have the willingness, and I think you got to see that where the most pain is, like that's your biggest opportunity for growth. And if you can, like I said, it's not a lot of times. It's not diving in head first. It's kind of getting things along the edges first of like, what are the most recent issues that you're not at peace with regarding that relationship? And, just going in and journaling and examining that stuff. Right. And so all we're trying to do is be like, well, like, okay, the story I've been telling myself about this, like, doesn't work because it puts me in this negative place. And so if I want to get past this, like, I have to start to see the situation differently. And so it's like taking deep breaths and being like, well, okay, if this is built on pain, that's not the truth. Okay. Like, because we can heal pain. So if I want to heal this pain, I have to be willing to look at it, and it's whatever pace you're comfortable with. There are some situations where intensive work suits it well, but most things, like, you kind of need to take one step towards it, and that might create a big blowout. But I think it's super important to feel your emotions. So it's like, if you have confrontation or big arguments, like, I think those are your gateway to change, right? Because you're getting emotions out, because everything's usually suppressed in that place where everything's locked in. And so when it's locked in like that, we have all these protection stories related to it. And so if we give ourselves permission to open it up, that is going to mean volatile emotions. And so it's like, it's okay to have those, right? We want to be able to feel those, because once you feel them, give yourself permission to, now you get to the other side of it. Okay, now that emotion's a little bit softer the next time. And that's all we're trying to do, is soften the emotions over time, so that now I can detach from that old painful story and I can start to formulate something new. Okay. And often when relationships are at that point, it's just there's just been so many things left unaddressed that it's all stacked up and it's all kind of blended together. And so I think it's important when a client comes to me and they are stuck or struggling, I'll always ask them, like, when did that start, right? Like, when did when did you start to feel stuck? Because it's usually something in their life was creating that stuckness, right? And they weren't handling it, they weren't dealing with it. And so it just got so big that it felt like impossible to maneuver through, right? And so that's that big question of like, where did things get off track? That's where you want to look first to try and discover like, okay, yeah, this situation created this chain of events, and now we're at this place where this is unworkable. But if you go back to the original thing, you might be like, oh, okay, like, yeah, this is the big piece where things are off track. Like, how can I start to shift that a little bit? Because you're just trying to alter the course like slightly each time you address it. Because if you dive in head first, and there's big emotions, like you can really go into shutdown pretty quickly because it's too much for your nervous system to process. So we want to start to shave it off, and you want to look at the root, like where did this start or how did this start, and just keep working that puzzle until some of these other pieces start to shift.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes really good sense. Yeah, you're obviously very well studied, experienced, and a rather eloquent person. So it's a great honor to ask you some questions about your life and hear all of the, just the ways that you've come up with to find solutions in your own life when someone wasn't able to just kind of hand it to you is a pretty cool and inspiring thing. So I think a lot of people find value in that. So thank you for coming on and for sharing a bit about your life and what you've learned.
Awesome. Thanks, Seth. This is great.
Yeah, man. We'll have to do it again sometime.
Yeah, for sure. Just let me know.
Thank you so much to Brandon for coming on the show today and for sharing a bit about who he is, the experiences that he has had, which have obviously been abundant, and a lot of the tools that he has kind of built over time to give to others to allow them to heal past traumas and things that are holding them back. I want to leave you with a few of his last words when I asked him basically how to repair a relationship with a parent or a loved one, maybe a sibling, someone that you just are at odds with. And he said, basically, give yourself permission to feel. It's okay to feel, and explore that feeling. If you trace it back to the beginning, you'll probably start to get an understanding of what needs to happen next. So thank you again to Brandon for coming on, and thank you for listening. If you made it to this point in the show, just want to say thank you so much. It really does mean a lot to me that you listen and that you are here to spend time with me. If you made it to this far in the show as well, I want to ask that you would please leave a like or a comment, subscribe, leave a review, sign up for our newsletter at stupidquestions.show. Any of those things really do help us to continue to grow this. And I'm having a lot of fun. Really love interacting with you guys and seeing how it's impacting your lives. I'm still new. I'm learning a ton, but thank you so much for allowing me to have this platform to grow and learn. All right. We'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya.